The phone rang at 2:13 in the morning. Maeve's heart woke before the sound reached her ears. That was the part that frightened her most. Her body had known. It had pulled her from sleep and left her staring into a dark room, listening to the old house settle around her. Then the phone rang again. It sat on a small walnut table in the hall outside the bedroom, a beige rotary phone with a cracked plastic receiver and a cloth cord the color of old bone. When Maeve and her husband had moved into the Bellwether house 3 days earlier, she had assumed it was decorative. There was no service connected. The nearest working cell tower was 8 miles south, beyond the ridge, and the property manager had laughed when she mentioned the phone. "That thing hasn't worked since Carter was in office," he had said. Which Carter, I couldn't tell you. Now it rang a third time. Beside Maeve, Daniel exhaled heavily and rolled onto his back. He did not wake. He had been driving state snowplows for 14 hours, clearing the logging road to the Canadian border, and he had fallen asleep in his clothes. Maeve pushed back the quilt and crossed the hallway barefoot. The phone rang again. She stopped 2 feet from it. For 11 years, she had worked emergency dispatch in Portland. She had been trained to answer ringing phones before the second ring. A ringing phone meant somebody's worst moment, a wreck, a fire, a child locked in a car, a person who had swallowed something, taken something, seen something, done something they could not undo. Her hands knew what to do, even when the rest of her did not. She lifted the receiver. She said automatically, "What is your emergency?" For a moment, there was only a thin, wet hiss. Then a girl whispered, "Is the water over the stairs yet?" Maeve's fingers tightened around the receiver. "Who is this?" The girl sounded young, 11, maybe 12. Her voice trembled with the careful effort not to cry. "Please," she said, "don't let him shut the door." The line went dead. Maeve stood in the hall with the receiver pressed to her ear. The house was silent except for the wind pressing snow against the windows. Behind her, Daniel said, "Ma?" She turned. He was sitting up, one hand in his hair. "The phone rang," she said. Daniel looked past her at the rotary phone. "The unplugged phone?" Maeve followed the cord with her eyes. It disappeared beneath the table, then reappeared from a hole in the baseboard. There was no wall jack, no outlet, no line. "You heard it too?" Daniel hesitated. "I heard something. I heard something. I heard something." He did not answer. At dawn, they found the phone cord cut cleanly beneath the floorboards. Bellwether, Maine, had been built around a signal station and then forgotten by everything that came after it. The town was a scatter of weather-darkened houses, a diner, a shuttered paper mill, and a white church that seemed too small for the dark pine forest, crowding it from every side. The old Bellwether Relay House stood half a mile north of town, alone at the end of a road that had once led to the regional telephone exchange. It was not a beautiful house. Its clapboards were gray with age, its porch tilted toward the woods, and its windows looked too narrow, as though the house had been built to keep something out. But it was cheap, furnished, and available for the winter. That was enough for Daniel. His temporary assignment with the Maine Department of Transportation had brought them north for 3 months. Maeve had agreed to come because she was tired of Portland, tired of the call center, tired of the supervisor's gentle voice, asking whether she was ready to resume full duties. She had not told Daniel that the word resume made her feel like a machine someone was trying to restart. The last call she had handled before taking leave had come from a boy hiding in a closet while his father broke furniture downstairs. Maeve had stayed on the line for 9 minutes. She had kept her voice level. She had promised help was coming. The officers arrived in 10. By then, the boy had stopped answering. The investigation had found nothing Maeve could have done differently. Her supervisor had repeated that sentence until it became a kind of cruelty. Nothing you could have done differently. On their first morning after the call, Daniel drove into town for coffee and came back with a woman named Ruth Kelleher in the passenger seat. Ruth was 70, sharp-eyed, and wrapped in a red wool coat despite the heat blasting from Daniel's truck. She introduced herself as the town librarian, historian, and, in her words, "enfither," and person they send when nobody else wants to explain a thing. Maeve made tea. Daniel cleared a chair at the kitchen table. Ruth studied the old phone in the hallway for a long time before she sat down. Suro. It rang, Maeve said. Daniel gave her a warning look, as if he worried Ruth would think she was fragile. Ruth only nodded. Suro. Did you answer? Yes. The older woman closed her eyes. "Ancre, what did it say?" Maeve told her. When she finished, Ruth pressed both palms against her cup. "That house was the Bellwether Relay," she said. "Not the whole exchange, just the backup line. If a storm knocked out the county system, calls got routed through here. 2 operators could keep the emergency board alive for 12 hours on battery power." "Why is there a phone in the house?" Daniel asked. "Because somebody needed to answer it." Euro. Ruth looked at Maeve. In February of 1986, a school bus went through the ice at Coldwater Quarry. 27 kids were on it. The driver had been drinking, but that was not the whole story. The county had allowed a construction company to blast too close to the road. They knew the ice was unstable. They knew it before the bus left the school. Maeve felt the room grow colder. "A girl named Lucy Bell got out," Ruth continued. "She made it to the maintenance shack. The relay operator, Ada Bell, was on duty that night. Lucy called from a payphone. Ada stayed with her on the line." "What happened to the children?" Maeve asked. Ruth's eyes flicked toward the hallway. "Most of them drowned before rescue reached them." Daniel leaned forward. "Aro, why?" "Saken. Because the sheriff kept the road closed." The words sat between them. "He said the ice would not hold rescue vehicles." Maybe he believed it. Maybe he was protecting the construction company. But Ada heard the whole thing. She heard the kids trapped in the bus. She heard Lucy begging someone to open the service gate. She heard Sheriff Wren tell the road crew to wait for county authorization. "And Ada?" Maeve asked. "Ada called the state police. Wren came here before they could arrive." Euro. Ruth looked down at her tea. They found Ada in the relay room the next morning. The official report said she killed herself. The board had been ripped from the wall. Every phone in the house was ringing. Daniel let out a short breath. "Logue, that's a story people tell newcomers," he said. "Logue, yes," Ruth said. "And some stories are told because they are easier than evidence. If you have ever stayed awake beside a phone that would not stop ringing, you know how impossible it is to leave it unanswered. If this kind of slow burn horror is pulling you closer, like the video and subscribe to the horror dream before the next call comes through." She reached into her bag and set an old brass key on the table. "Below, the relay room is in the basement. Do not go in there after dark. And if that phone rings again, do not tell it you are listening." Maeve stared at her. "What am I supposed to say?" Ruth's mouth tightened. "Nothing." The second call came the following night. Daniel was still at work. A freezing rain storm had brought down trees along Route 11, and his crew had been sent north to clear roads until morning. Maeve was alone in the living room, with a book open in her lap and the television playing low enough to feel like company. At 2:13, the phone rang. She did not move. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, the television screen filled with static. Maeve stood. The phone rang again. She remembered Ruth's warning. She remembered the little girl's voice. She remembered a boy in a closet whispering, "Is my mom still breathing?" Maeve picked up the receiver. "I'm listening," she said. The hiss became a roar of wind. Then a man said, "Maeve?" She stopped breathing. The voice belonged to her father. He had been dead for 9 years. Dad. 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 Someone knocking steadily against wood said, "Where are you?" "Get out of the house," he said. "Get Daniel out. There's a room below you, and it's filling up." The receiver went cold in Maeve's hand. The call ended. For a long time, she stood still. Then she heard water dripping beneath the floor. Daniel came home near noon, exhausted and irritated at the coffee maker, the storm, and the fact that Maeve had not slept. She told him about the call. He listened without interrupting, which was worse than disbelief. "I know how this sounds," she said. "I don't think you're making it up. But your dad died in hospice, Maeve. You were there. I know that. You've been under a lot of pressure." She laughed once, without humor. "You know what the problem is with people who work dispatch?" Daniel looked away. Think, every voice is real. The silence after that felt deliberate. That evening, Daniel went into the basement alone. Maeve found him an hour later at the bottom of the stairs, holding the brass key Ruth had left behind. The basement door stood open. Cold air came up from below, carrying the smell of wet pennies. "Selsing, what are you doing?" she asked. Daniel did not turn around. "I heard my sister." Maeve's anger vanished. Daniel's younger sister, Abby, had died in a car crash when he was 19. He rarely spoke about her. When he did, he called it an accident and changed the subject. "You're on the phone?" Maeve asked. He nodded. "She said she's cold." Maeve moved beside him. The brass key shook in his hand. "Heel, Daniel. That isn't it, Abby." His eyes were fixed on the black stairwell. "How do you know?" Then, from somewhere below, a phone began to ring. The relay room had been hidden behind a warped basement wall. The key opened a narrow door that should not have fit inside the house. Beyond it was a brick corridor descending at a steep angle. Old copper wire ran along the walls in tight, orderly bundles, disappearing into the floor like roots. The air was damp and warm. Every few seconds, a drop fell from the ceiling and struck the concrete with a sound almost exactly like a receiver being placed in its cradle. Maeve wanted to leave. Daniel went first. At the bottom, they found a room the size of a small chapel. 47 telephones sat on a long switchboard beneath rows of dead indicator lights. Some were rotary phones, some had square buttons. One was a red payphone receiver, mounted to a wall with no booth around it. Every cord ran into a hole in the floor. None of the phones were ringing. In the center of the room stood a desk with a molded plastic chair. A black headset rested on the desk beside a reel-to-reel recorder. Daniel walked toward it. Maeve caught his sleeve. "Your tack." He looked down at her hand. You came down here too, to bring you back up. To bring you back up. Abby called me." "No." Something used her voice. Daniel pulled free. "And your father?" The question hurt because it was fair. Before Maeve could answer, a green indicator light blinked on the board. Then another. Then every light turned on at once. The room erupted with ringing. 47 different bells screamed through the dark. Daniel clapped his hands over his ears. Maeve backed into the wall. The copper wires began to quiver. Water leaked from the holes in the floor and spread across the concrete in thin silver lines. The black headset lifted from the desk by itself. It swung once, then dropped into the chair. All 47 phones stopped. A woman's voice filled the room. "Roperator," it said. Maeve stared at the empty chair. "Roperator, do you hear me?" Daniel whispered. "Who is that?" Maeve did not answer. Her training had become a cage around her. Every instinct told her to speak, to identify herself, to hold the caller in place. The woman asked again, "Do you hear me?" Maeve said, "Yes." Euro. The temperature dropped so sharply that her breath smoked. The board lights went black. From the recorder, a little girl began to sob. Ruth did not seem surprised when Maeve appeared at the library the next afternoon, pale and shaking, with Daniel beside her. She locked the front door, turned the sign to closed, and took them down to the local history room. "Maeve, you answered," Ruth said. Maeve nodded. "Then it has an operator again." "What is it?" "Euro," Daniel asked. Ruth pulled a flat archival box from a shelf. Inside was a black and white photograph of Ada Bell. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pinned above a tired face. She wore a headset and sat at the Bellwether switchboard. Maeve looked at the photograph, Ruth said. But it was not her ghost that stayed there. Maeve looked at the photograph. Then what stayed? Maeve looked at the calls. Ruth opened a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "7 dead in quarry tragedy." Sever Lucy Bell was not the only child who got out, Ruth said. The 4 others survived in the bus long enough to make calls. The old line connected through the relay house. Ada recorded everything. Those children kept asking if someone was coming. Ada kept telling them yes. Rowe, but no one came, Maeve said. Not until it was too late. Ruth's face had gone gray. When Sheriff Wren came to the house, Ada would not hang up. He cut the line. He destroyed her tapes. And then he killed her. Daniel went very still. That was never proven, Ruth said. But Sheriff Wren disappeared the week after the funeral. They found his cruiser at Coldwater Quarry. The radio was still transmitting. Nobody ever found him. Maeve looked toward the snow-streaked library window. Why did it call us? It calls people who have heard a voice they could not save. Maeve thought of the boy in the closet. Daniel thought of Abby. She could see it in his face. It offers them another chance, Ruth continued. That is how it gets them downstairs. You answer enough times, and it asks you to take the headset. Then you sit in Ada's chair and keep listening forever. What happens if we leave? Daniel asked. Ruth gave a small, sad shake of her head. You can leave the house. The calls do not have to stay there. Daniel began sleeping in the relay room 2 nights later. Maeve discovered it at 4 a.m. when she woke and found the bed empty. The basement door was open. A faint blue glow pulsed beneath it. She went downstairs with a flashlight and found Daniel sitting at the switchboard desk, wearing the black headset. He was speaking softly. I should have been driving, he said. I know, Abby. Maeve froze in the doorway. Daniel had told her the crash had been caused by black ice. That was all he had ever said. You asked me not to let you go with him, he whispered. I was mad. I was stupid. Neuro. The copper wires around the room twitched. So, Daniel, Maeve said. He looked at her, and his face was wet with tears. She forgives me. From the headset came a young woman's voice, thin with static. Do I, Danny? Maeve crossed the room and tore the headset away. The lights exploded. For one instant, every phone on the board displayed a face in its dark plastic surface. Not a reflection, a face behind the glass. Children pressed their palms against the phone windows. A woman with blood in her hair, an old man with a breathing tube, the boy from Maeve's last call, staring directly at her. Then the room went dark. Daniel grabbed Maeve's arm hard enough to bruise. You don't get to take her away from me. She stared at him. His eyes looked wrong, not possessed, worse, hopeful. The thing in the relay room did not need to control them. It only needed to make them want to stay. The next morning, Maeve drove to Coldwater Quarry alone. The road was blocked by a rusted chain and a sign that read, "No trespassing." Beyond it, the trees opened onto a frozen basin of white stone. The quarry lake lay beneath the snow, flat and dull as lead. At the water's edge stood a small memorial, 7 names engraved on a slab of granite, half hidden by weeds. Maeve found Lucy Bella's name among them. She had expected a dead child's name to feel final. It did not. It felt like the beginning of a question. On the drive back, her cell phone rang, despite having no signal. The screen was black. No number, no caller ID. Maeve pulled over. She answered. Hello? The boy from the closet said. You told me help was coming. Maeve closed her eyes. I did. It didn't, Maeve. Euro, I know. The line hissed. Then why did you stop talking? Her throat closed. Because the officers had arrived. Because the call had been transferred. Because the line had gone quiet. Because Maeve had allowed herself to believe the procedure was the same thing as rescue. I was afraid, and she whispered. For a long time, there was nothing but static. Then the boy said, so was I. The call ended. Maeve sat on the side of the road until the snow began falling harder. When she finally returned to Bellwether, the house lights were on. Every window glowed blue. Daniel had opened the relay room. Maeve knew before she entered. The front door stood wide. The house smelled of hot metal and lake water. Phones rang from every room, the kitchen, the hall, the bedroom, even the upstairs closet. Old receivers hung from walls where no phones had been before. Their cords trailed down like black veins. Oh, Danielle, she shouted. His voice came from below. I am sorry, Maeve. The basement steps were wet. Water rushed down them in clear sheets, though no pipe had burst. At the bottom, the relay room was filled ankle-deep with black water. Daniel sat in Ada's chair with the headset over his ears. All 47 phones rang. Maeve waited toward him. Take it off. Daniel looked at her. His skin was almost colorless. She says I can fix it. Wahoo. 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 The voice in the headset answered for him. No, it said. Randa. The phone stopped ringing. In the black water behind Daniel, a woman rose slowly to her feet. She wore a 1980s telephone operator's uniform, soaked through and dark with water. Her hair hung across one side of her face. On the other side, Her cheek was bruised, nearly black. Ada Bell looked at Maeve. "You know what it is to hear them," Ada said. Maeve's mouth went dry. "You know what it costs to leave the line. You're not Ada," Maeve said. The woman smiled, and water spilled from her mouth. No. Every phone in the room began to ring again. Maeve saw it then. The thing had never been Ada. It had been built from the moment everyone had failed, from the children calling through the ice, from Ada's broken promise, from the people who cut the line and called it necessary. It had learned to wear Ada's grief, because grief was the fastest way inside a person. It wanted Daniel because he believed guilt could be repaid by listening forever. It wanted Maeve because she knew that sometimes help did not come. "Let him go," she said. "Take the calls," Ada said. Ancre Sonoro Maeve, the water rose to Maeve's knees. "Then he will." Daniel's fingers tightened around the chair arms. The headset cable wound once around his wrist like a snake. Maeve looked at the board. 47 blinking lights. 47 calls waiting for a promise that would never arrive. Then she noticed a switch beneath the desk, almost hidden by water. It was labeled outbound, not inbound. Maeve had spent years sending help toward other people. Dispatchers did not keep callers alive by listening forever. They found a location. They sent someone. They made the call go outward. She stepped toward the switch. Ada and Alive's face changed. And, "Do not." The water grabbed Maeve's ankles. Daniel cried out, "Hey Maeve, don't leave me here." The voice was his. Under it, Abby's voice pleaded. Her father's, the boy's, the little girl from the first call. Maeve almost stopped. Then she remembered what the boy had said. "So was I." "I hear you," Maeve said. The room went still. She said it again, louder. "I hear all of you." The water released her feet. Maeve reached beneath the desk and threw the outbound switch. The switchboard screamed, not with one sound, but hundreds. Rings, dial tones, radio chatter, sirens, people shouting addresses. The copper wires tore themselves out of the walls and whipped through the air. The phones burst open one by one, showering the room with plastic and sparks. Above them, every light in the house came on. Maeve grabbed Daniel's chair and pulled him backward. The headset snapped loose. For a second, his face was blank. Then he looked at her. "Chenyero, Sirmime." The black water rose around Ada Bella's ankles. The woman screamed, not in pain, but rage. "They will hang up on you," she said. "They always do." Maeve held Daniel against her. "Unmer." "Then we keep trying." The outbound lines lit the room white. For one impossible moment, Maeve heard the voices change. Not cries, not pleas. Answers. People saying, "I'm here." People saying, "We found you." People saying, "Hold on." The room collapsed inward, with a sound like 100 receivers being set down at once. If that unanswered call is still echoing in your mind, subscribe to The Horror Dream for more original nightmares. Maeve and Daniel had survived the house, but neither of them knew whether the house had survived them. The fire department found the house at sunrise. The basement had flooded, but there was no relay room beneath it. No 47 phones, no switchboard, just an old stone foundation and a shallow pool of dark water. Daniel and Maeve spent 2 nights in the hospital for hypothermia. Ruth Kelleher visited them on the second day. She brought a newspaper in a plastic sleeve. The state police opened the cold water file, she said. They found records in an old county storage room. Sheriff Wren was paid by the quarry contractor. Ada had mailed copies of the call log before she died. Maeve looked at the faded article. The names of the dead children were printed beneath a photograph of the quarry. "Was it over?" she asked. Ruth looked at Daniel, then at Maeve. "On things end. Some things only find another line." Daniel took Maeve's hand. He had not mentioned Abby since the relay room. He did not need to. The grief was still there, but it belonged to him again. They left Bellwether before the snow melted. 6 months later, Maeve returned to dispatch. She worked the overnight shift, at first only with a supervisor nearby. Her hands still trembled before a call. She still woke sometimes at 2:13, certain she could hear a phone ringing in another room. But she answered. One humid night in July, a woman called from a stalled car on a highway outside Portland. Her voice was breaking, A man was standing in the trees beside the road. She did not know the mile marker. She did not know which direction she had been driving. Maeve kept her on the line. She asked for landmarks. She asked the woman to describe the sound of traffic. She sent troopers. She sent an ambulance. The woman began to cry. "Please don't hang up," she said. Maeve looked at the dark reflection of her computer screen. For an instant, she saw a row of old rotary phones behind her, their indicator lights glowing green. Then they were gone. Maeve said, "Outside the dispatch center, the summer rain began." On the line, far beneath the woman's frightened breathing, another voice whispered through the static. Not Ada Bell. Not a child. Maeve's own voice. "Keep trying," it said.